Hi everyone, my name is Erica, aka ECR Horses 1901, and today is the first episode in the So You're an F Tier series. As you can probably guess, we're going to be talking about the Shire, aka the Bell-Bottom Shire, introduced in 1972, sculpted by Chris Hess. Just as a quick recap before I jump in, if you don't know what this whole series is in reference to, I actually started off my channel by doing a tier ranking of every traditional size Brier horse mold, so I will make sure that at the end of this video there is a link that will take you directly to the first of that series. When the Shire appeared in 1972, she could initially be found in several colors. This matte dappled gray, or at least what was considered dappled gray during that time period, and a matte honey sorrel, who we'll get to later. The gray has a bald face, a wide dorsal stripe, which you can see here on the cover of Felicia Brauel's Breyer Animal Collector's Guide, and white feathers. The description of this model says, the mane and tail are meant to be darker gray than the body, but that is not glaringly obvious on the examples I've seen, including this one from Identifier Breyer, and this other example from BrierHorseRef.com. The amount of shading on this model varied though, so it is probable that some had manes and tails that were in fact darker. The gray existed from 1972 to 1973, and then again from 1975 to 1976. 6 glossy and chalky models are thought to exist, yes that is 6 in total, having been found in the Chicago factory by Marnie Walerius before its closure in 1985. According to Andrea Gurdon's Brier History Diva blog, one theory at the time as to why these models existed was because Breyer needed to use up the last buckets of an older gloss varnish. And this is my theory now. The Shire is such a large, chunky model, each one would use up a lot of that gloss, so it does make some sense. The honey sorrel had a slightly longer run overall, from 1972 to 1976, and then from 1978 to 1980, with quite a bit of variation during that time. Most notably, models from the initial run, as well as 1978, have a stencil bald face, which you can see on this leftmost model here, and to a much lesser extent that we'll talk about in a second in the second model, whereas those from 1978 to 1980 have a bald face that is unstenciled, like on this third mare. In some cases, the stenciled marking was quite sharp, again, see this first one, but other times, like in the center model, the stenciling could actually be quite soft, to the point of looking as though it could have been unstenciled. The model's main coat color also varied during its run, from very dark, almost liver chestnut, to a very bright red shade. Honey sorrel is just the term that was used by Breyer catalogs at this time, but honestly, some versions, like especially this one on the left, and I guess to a lesser extent this one in the middle, appear to be straight up bay instead of anything resembling an actual chestnut or sorrel horse. Identifier Breyer shows an example of a chalky on this colorway, but I couldn't find any more information about this one. One factoid I thought was interesting, as noted in Nancy Atkinson Young's book, Breyer Molds and Models, Horses, Riders, and Animals, which, by the way, I completely recommend owning. It is a great reference source, is that the reason for the Shire's brief discontinuation during the 1970s was the oil crisis. And I quote, "Breyer's cellulose acetate plastic is not a petroleum product, but did become scarce during that period." Again, the Shire is a big model. And digging into this a little, I noticed that other larger boys, such as the Clydesdale Stallion, also did not appear for a time during the 70s, so there could be something to that. When the Shire returned, it was for Montgomery Ward's holiday catalog in 1982, and again in 1983. She was, as you can tell, once more a dappled gray, with only slight differences from her initial coloring. There was no dorsal stripe, for example, and she was actually part of a set with this black Belgian model. In 1985, we finally had a little more variety. Rieksekkers sold the Shire in 4 new colorways, including this actual bay, black, solid smoke gray, and a palomino. A bright, mostly unrealistic version of a palomino, but nevertheless. These 4 were actually sold together as a set, and this was limited to just 300 pieces, per an announcement in the 1985 results program of the International Model Horse Collectors Congress. Think Brierfest before Brierfest. Following that, this mold was put on hiatus until 1992, when it returned yet again as part of a draft set, the one you see here, for a holiday catalog. This time it was for Sears, and she was a very rich, deep palomino color, despite the fact that Shires are not supposed to be palomino at all, paired with both an alabaster Belgian and a chestnut Roy, and the whole set was limited to 2,250 pieces. 1995 was a big year for the Shire, as she appeared as not 1, but 2 Brierfest live auction lots. Now, one thing you should know is that the auction models from these early Brierfest years were quite different from what we see now. Identifier Breyer describes 1995's auction models as, and it says right up here, test colors up for bid. So while some of these are quite striking if you look down the page, presumably these were test colors, as it says, for potential regular runs in the future. So not all of them are over-the-top unique. In any case, the Shire appeared as a dappled blood bay and an American cream Shire with 2-color eyes, although, unfortunately, we do not have a great picture of this model, but I think she would be my preferred of the 2. The dapples on the Blood Bay are extremely old school Breyer, but I'm not really feeling it, nor do I like the black over the white feathers on the legs. In any case, the Blood Bay sold for $575, and the American Cream for $500, and those prices were not bad for that year, more or less right in the middle. In 1997, she returned as a Brierfest live auction lot, the super spotted black Leopard Appaloosa, which I guess is one way of putting that. This color reminds me a lot of Sgt. Pepper, 2003 Brierfest special run on the Big Ben mold. You might think I'm going to say that I hate it, but I don't. So, although we don't have a great picture of the Shire with this colorway, I imagine it was rather striking. Well, striking it must have been, because this model sold, again in 1997, for $1,200, and was one of the more expensive models from the live auction that year. Then, for the first time since 1980, the Shire finally reappeared as a regular run model, but only for 1 year, from 1998 to 1999, as this shaded light bay with dark points. And by 1998, we already had new molds like Marabella, like Cigar, which are also not perfect, but are a little more detailed than our dear Shire, so I am personally not surprised that this one was not kept around for longer. Be that as it may, in 2002, she was back as a Brierfest live auction lot once again, and once again she is a Blood Bay, but this time a Blood Bay Sabino instead of with dapples. I think this coloring is probably the best there has been on this mold so far, but the mold itself is what hampers the overall picture. The bidders were still generous, however, because she went for $950, which again was pretty mid-tier for price. Quick side note, 2002 appears to be the first year that Brierfest had a theme, at least as far as I could tell, and that theme was Spirit of the West, celebrating the American West. It still seemed to have a pretty smallish number of people, as the celebration horse that year, the Peruvian Paso mold RSV, Inolvidable is recorded as having just 4,000 pieces. Imagine a Brier Fest with just 4,000 people. Anyway, moving on. Finally, in 2003, the Shire mold was back as part of the Collector's Edition series, which is when 2 different versions of a mold are sold from January through June, and then a different version from July through December. Her January through June model was Monarch, and this really reminds me of the glossy Honey Bay, which I've seen on the old mold Proud Arabian Mare. I'm going to guess that harkening back to old school colorways was the theme for this year's Collector's Edition pair of Shires, especially with the inclusion of the blue ribbon sticker, but also because her July through December model was Smoke and Mirrors, a smoke gray with a white mane and tail, again, previously seen on models like the Running Mare from the 1960s. Anyway, I actually find both of these colors very pleasing to the eye, even on this mold. But alas, 2003 is the final year we're going to see the Shire used for a regular run, although it is far from the end of her use overall. After a several-year hiatus, the mold was brought back in 2010 for a Brierfest live auction lot. She is described as a glossy Red Bay Wild Sabino Shire. Not gonna lie, I do not care for this one. The edges of the Sabino markings just don't look natural to me, and I actually think that this is one of the rare times where this model would look better ungloss. Okay, I am team glossy almost all of the time, but in some instances, such as this one, I am actually team matte. Well, the Shire continued to rake in decently high bids this year and sold for $1,700. Brierfest 2012 was the British invasion year, so a Shire model just makes sense. Our girl was used as the special run Cheerio, a glossy bay Tobiano with 1,000 made. I tried to do some digging online to see if people were talking much about this model on blogs or any easily accessible place online, but I didn't actually find too much. Now granted, 2012 feels like it should be just yesterday, but it's now very solidly in the past, so that probably has something to do with it. But I am curious as to what the reception to her was like at the time. In 2013, we got a Shire Mare warehouse find, a bright bay very similar to the 1998 through 1999 model. In fact, I'd be willing to bet it was literally a warehouse find from that run. The only difference I can see, and it could just be the angle of this picture, is that this one has black hooves as opposed to gray hooves. Okay, so this is the warehouse find. Check out those hooves. And here is the 98 to 99 regular run. Okay, hopefully you can see the bit of difference. Chasing the Chesapeake was 2016's Collectors Club event that October in Elkton, Maryland. The Shire mold was used as a 50-piece special run Testudo, who is this rather nice liver chestnut. You can even spy some dappling on, which is a great touch. The Shire's final appearance was in 2019 as part of the Vintage Club with Bernadette. Not only did she appear in 4 classic decorator colors, we have Florentine, Gold Charm, Copenhagen, and Wedgwood, but she also came, as you can see in this picture, in very old school touchability boxes, which I personally think might be the coolest part of the whole thing. Only 125 pieces were made of each colorway. As of August 2024, that is it for this mold. But she has come back with enough regularity that I somehow doubt that is the last that we have seen of her. So, having spent a bunch of time poring over all of this mold's iterations, and having gotten my hands on one of the sorry, I am continuously bad at showing models on video, but after having gotten one of the Honey Sorrels, who has one of the stenciled faces, and who I believe is from my cat. Sorry, just ignore the open door. My cat's gonna keep pushing it. My cat is probably going to keep pushing it open. Anyway, I believe that this model is from the 1970s, probably the earlier 1970s, due to its mold marks, its darker color, and its stenciled blaze. So, would I still place the Shire in F tier? This is a hard one. I do see more charm in the mold than I did before. I mean, she is a literal chunk. So much wider than I think any other model that I have. And one thing is that unlike so many of the other older models, and again, if you have watched my initial ranking series, you will remember this being a comment I made again and again and again for older models. She actually has, and I'm doing a terrible job of showing it, but she actually has an appealing head and face. I understand a little bit better how this mold has its fans, but nevertheless, when I look at it overall, there's just too many smaller problems with it for me to overlook. I can't picture myself buying another one of these models, but I don't regret the small amount of money that I paid to get this example. I think the best I could do is theoretically move her up to D tier, and it would be a straight D tier, because I don't think she could ever be a C, so D+ is out, but I do think she deserves a little bit more credit than being lumped into the lowest tier. Well, I hope you liked this first video in our So You're an F tier series. I am not 100% sure which of the other F tiers I will be covering next time. I might make a poll, so keep your eyes open for that. And as I posted in my most recent comment, I do have a small list of upcoming videos, still largely Brierfest related, so do also keep your eye out for those. Thank you for being here, and if you enjoyed today's video, I hope you will like and subscribe if you aren't already. And as always, comments are always welcome. Take care, and I will see you next time.